you're working on practical joy and your hoopings are not lining up properly, suggestions on how to improve your process. Now, you actually sound like you're doing all the right things. So you're marking your stabilizer, measuring it, marking it, remeasuring it, and then basting. Stitching color number 1 and positioning your background fabric. You're using positioning pins at each intersection, plus at least 4 more pins, left, right, above and below the intersections. Pinning it in place, you hold up to a light and make sure that the lines drawn on your stabilizer, drawn and basted onto your stabilizer, match up with what you've stitched up onto in the hoop. Adjusting and repinning as necessary, but something's still going awry.
So
let's see what you got exactly.
Okay, so here's my camera. This bottom, this second hooping.
Go up a little bit. Or, okay, I see where you look. Okay, so where the body of your pot is attaching to the
right, and unfortunately this piece that doesn't line up is the very last section that's done, so I didn't know it wasn't going to line up until I got to that point. So I've measured this. It looks like on one side, on the left side, it's off by less than 1/8 of an inch, and on this side it's off by just more than 1/8 of an inch, which tells me it might be not just off to the side, but crooked a little bit.
Yeah, so something is just a little bit out of alignment somewhere.
Right.
And the question is where?
The mechanics of what I need to be doing, but I'm missing the execution somewhere, and I don't know where. This is the third block where this has happened.
Okay. So chances are it's when you are doing your alignment. I'm gonna hazard a guess that it's when you're actually doing the alignment. So you've got the stabilizer and the hoop, you stitched color number 1, and now you've got your quilt top, which has been marked up. You've got the stabilizer on the back of it, and you've basted the stabilizer to the background, and you're trying to get the background fabric onto the stabilizer and the hoop.
You kind of lost me there.
So you've got a piece of stabilizer in your hoop.
Right.
And you stitched color number 1.
Right.
Right. I don't have a piece of stabilizer handy, but I got a hoop handy. So imagine there's a piece of stabilizer in here.
Right.
So you've got your hoop. It's an intersection, at least one intersection. For the bigger designs, there's typically 2 intersections.
Right.
Okay. So then on the other hand, you've got your background fabric. You've drawn your markings onto a piece of stabilizer. You've basted it onto the background fabric.
Right.
And now it's a case of getting the background fabric and the intersection mark there aligned with what you got on the stabilizer in the hoop.
Right.
How are you doing that alignment?
So I'm putting my hoop with the stabilizer in color 1 stitched on a wool pressing mat.
Okay.
Laying my quilt top on that, putting a pin through the quilt top, and then lifting it up to see where it needs to go into the stabilizer. So I've got a pin that's going straight up and down. And then I'm doing positioning pins beside that, and pulling up the side of the quilt block to make sure that that line is going straight, that the lines are matching from the back. The stitch line on the background is matching the stitched line in the hoop. Putting another positioning hoop. So now I've got, let's say, 5 positioning pins, and I'm making sure they stand straight up like little soldiers. And then I start pinning the background to the hoop to the stabilizer in the hoop and make sure those pins still stay vertical. Pinning all around those. And then once I've got everything pinned, 6 or 8 pins, then I'm pulling out the positioning pins, holding it up to a light to make sure everything still matches. If it doesn't, then I'll readjust 1 or 2 lines as needed.
So it's possible that something is shifting between doing your check, looking through from the back, and actually putting it on the machine.
Okay.
It sounds like that's the only possible point that something is shifting. So I have a suggestion for you. If you could see my table right now, it's a disaster area. So I'm looking for is my double-sided tape, and it's over there. Never mind. So when you are, when you've got your stabilizer in the hoop and you've stitched your intersections on it, instead of putting pins, well, you want to do the pins as well, but put some double-sided quilter's tape around the outside of the hoop, not all the way to the edge of it, but probably to the ends of the placement lines. Like a good long bit down both of the sides, a good long bit at the top and the bottom.
What am I taping?
Well, you're putting double-sided quilter's tape onto the stabilizer.
Okay.
In the hoop, right? Then you're going to do your thing with pins to make sure that everything is aligned. And instead of pinning the background fabric to the stabilizer in the hoop, you're going to whip away the backing tape off the quilter's tape and stick the top onto the stabilizer in the hoop.
Okay.
So there's less of a chance that it's going to scoot around.
Okay.
Okay. And maybe see how that goes. It sounds very much like you know what the technique is. So the only thing that I can think of is when you're doing the pinning, maybe the pinholes are getting a little big. I don't know, I'm making up guesses here. And whilst you're holding on to it, it's looking good and you're doing your double check, but by the time you got to the machine, there's just a little tiny bit of shifting.
Okay.
Whereas if you put the tape to hold the background fabric onto the stabilizer in the hoop, it should be pretty much stuck there.
Okay. So one additional check I can make to verify your theory is after I have done that basting line, I need to take it off of the machine and look again to see if it's still lined up.
You could do that. Another thing would actually be to go back to column 1 and check the position of the placement line.
Okay.
And then you can fine tune it. You can always do that. So have you done any of the quilting yet?
No.
Have you done any of the quilting in the hoop on any project?
Not on anything this big. I just finished the butterfly and I actually used your designs to stitch on my long arm instead of on my embroidery.
Okay,
So
because
no,
your butterfly is
nothing.
beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love it.
Good. It's beautiful.
I did a black and white. I don't know where it is. I did a black and white version of block 1 because I was doing a program for our guild and I wanted to talk about all of the different ways that you could quilt, whether it's hiring a long arm or doing it yourself. And I did just the black and white, no applique version of block 1, Joy block 1. And I did all of the quilting in the hoop on that. No problems there. No significant issues.
So you're familiar then with using color number 1 as an alignment line?
Yes.
Not as a placement line. So you can do the same thing. So first off, stitch it on the stabilizer as a placement line.
Right.
Get the background fabric onto the stabilizer in the hoop. And even if it's just as a rough guesstimate of where it needs to go, then go back to the machine, stitch the basting line, which is the first part of color number 2. And before you actually go into any of the detail stitching on color number 2, go back to color number 1 and use it as an alignment line.
Okay, that's a good idea.
And that way you can get it absolutely spot on.
Okay. All right, that sounds like that's a good idea. I'll try that.
Okay. And so try the double-sided tape to holding the background fabric onto the stabilizer and the hoop, and reusing color number 1 as an alignment line once you've stitched the basting line.
Okay, let me just show you this. I'm working on block 4, I think. So I've got my positioning pins in here. And you can see I don't know that you can see this, but on the back of the block, you know, I held it up to the light to make sure everything's lined up. So I'm right at the point that I either need to take this out and use the double-sided tape, or go back to do the basting line and do what you just suggested to get that lined up.
If you haven't done the basting line at the beginning of color number 2, you can just use some of the double-sided tape to make sure that it's really stuck where it needs to be.
Right, and that's going to require a trip to the store.
Well, if you don't have any on hand, skip that part and just use color number 1 as the alignment line.
Right, I'll give that a try. Yeah, the other thing I did, and it's really a lot of work, and I hate to keep doing it, but I went back to the art version of the designs and I isolated just the applique placement lines. So I can bring that design up and just make sure, looking at the applique placement lines, that they're going to stitch where they need to. But your idea is much, much easier than trying to go edit all of those designs to isolate just the pieces I need. So for this one, the hooping number 2 should be easy, but hooping number 3 on this block, I've got like 3 rocks that sit on top of the leaf. So the placement's going to be pretty persnickety on that. So I want to make sure I get it right.
It sounds like you're heading very much in the right direction.
Okay. Okay, a couple of great suggestions. I appreciate that, Sarah.
You are very welcome. And come back and let us know how you get on.
Okay, I will.
Okay, nice to see you, Peggy.
Thanks, you too.